Hi, Joseph.
Hi, David.
This is Joey Reggs, everybody. My partner, Joseph Levey. Joseph, just so you know who we are and who Joseph is New York State's leading liquor license attorney. We do more applications than anybody. Joseph's been eating regulations for breakfast as part of his regular diet for the last 15 years. For the last 6 years, Joseph and I have been deep into cannabis. We started traveling to Colorado and California and all the states where it was legal. We were talking to general counsels of gummy companies. We were going to cultivation sites because there's a lot to learn when it comes to this industry. And we knew that we wanted to learn from states where it was legal. We came back here, we started getting involved with it. We've been involved with the regulations. We've been advising clients who have card licenses. We're doing deals. We're in it deep. And Joey Reggs has been so immersed in the regs that have come out. I walked in this morning early. He was sitting at the desk. He had his glasses on. He had his pen in his hand. He was on page 157 because he couldn't get enough of them. So welcome, everybody. Thank you all for coming. We're really happy to have you. We are so excited that cannabis is here, and we're going to talk about it today. And we're going to talk about how you win at cannabis. And Joseph, according to you, because everybody's got a different definition of what win is, what is winning at cannabis?
Yeah, it's a good question, and thanks for the intro, David. A lot of people think about this and have been thinking about it as the application is the end all be all. Let's gear up, let's do whatever we have to do, and let's get our application in. And if we win, hey, congratulations, we won the lottery. And it's not actually like that. Sure, the application's a big part of it, and that's what is going to give you your license to do business. But just because you get a license doesn't mean you're guaranteed generational wealth. You have to set a strong foundation, and oftentimes that should begin now. So you should be preparing for your application while you're preparing the foundation for a business that can actually grow and scale and be profitable and be everything you want to be. And if you take shortcuts now, it's going to come back to bite you in the ass later.
Yeah, I mean, we represent the restaurant industry, and we see people going out of business all the time, and it's always for similar reasons. And cannabis has its own similar reasons why people are putting money into getting licenses and then going nowhere with them. What are those reasons before we start getting into some stuff? Because today, by the way, we're going to get into the regs. We're going to talk about what's come out. We're going to talk about the application process and what it's going to look like and what we think it's going to look like, because it's not all there in black and white yet. But Joseph, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, look, the two issues that are the most popular in why cannabis businesses can't get off the ground is, number one, people are undercapitalized. You have a great idea, you may even have decent people, and you start to put an application together, congratulations, you get approved, but you don't have the money to execute your plan. So number one reason people screw this up is they're undercapitalized, either because they don't know how much it's going to cost and they go in blind, or because they think they can do it on a shoestring and they can't. The second reason that everybody screws everything up is because they don't align themselves with the right people. Everybody thinks they can do everything themselves, and they just can't. And at some point, people need to accept what they know and accept what they don't, and go get the right people to help plug those gaps. Those are
what are the points? What are the important points along the way? So let's just get into this, because everybody here wants to apply for a license. We're going to talk today about recreational dispensary licenses. We're not going to talk about the other stuff. So what are the problems? What are the points along the way where people have to make sure that they're doing things right?
Well, there's a ton of points along the way, but like I said, it starts now. You can't be thinking about this as, oh, I better get my cannabis application together. You better think about this as, I better get my cannabis application together, but also I need to start setting the foundation for a business if I want it to be successful. Sometimes it's the same people that help you now that help you later. Sometimes it's different people. But I think it's just the philosophy of understanding that you need to start setting your business foundation now, not just your application foundation.
Good point. Why don't we get started with our presentation? Here's a legal disclaimer. What we are about to tell you is not legal advice, period. Next. Cannabis regulations are final. Let's talk about timeline. Joseph, what are we looking at? We hear some dates. We know October 4th. We know 60-day window. How's this thing going to play out from here until, I don't know, till the application window opens? Let's start there.
Yeah, it's a good question. And we've certainly gotten more clarity than we've ever had before. Yesterday's Cannabis Control Board meeting approved and ratified the final version of the regs for cannabis in New York State, which we've been waiting for years patiently. There's not a tremendous amount of differences in the version that was approved yesterday versus the prior version. Some little nuanced things here and there, and we'll probably put something out about that, but we're not going to talk too much about it today. But what was really important that happened yesterday is they gave us some more clarity on timing. They confirmed an October 4th opening date for the majority of applications to the general public. It'll be through a portal system similar to how the card program rolled out, where you log on to the New York State portal and they will populate it with applications for many of the popular applications that people are talking about, including retail dispensaries. It'll be a 60-day application window that's open from October 4th. That'll go until December 3rd. And, you know, one thing where the state has waffled back and forth with respect to timing and process is at first they were going to open an application window, accept all applications, close, and then begin a review process. Then that changed to a rolling review and approval process. So there was really an incredible benefit to being first in, because you're looking at a totally, white canvas, right? You can shoot your shot and there's no one to compete with. And if you're in first, you're at a significant advantage. It seems that they've rolled that back somewhat. And that's partially because of this provisional license program, which we'll talk about later, where if you apply on October 4th with a location locked up, they will review your license application within the first 30 days.
Wait, stop. Can you rewind and repeat that again? Because you said something, a couple of important things there. Can you say that exact sentence again, please?
If you apply on October 4th, or really anytime thereafter, with a location locked up, meaning anything from a signed LOI with a landlord to a signed lease to a deed for a building, any of the above would constitute locked up. They will review your license application within the first 30 days of that 60-day window, meaning if you apply October 4th, by November 4th, your application will be reviewed.
All right. So this seems important because, first of all, finding space, as we know, because we're representing a bunch of people now who are looking, is not so easy. When you say LOI, letter of intent, do you mean that it can be a non-binding letter of intent that just says between a landlord and a prospective tenant, here are the basic terms of the deal and we plan on going forward?
Yes, that's what I mean. However, I will just caution that landlords in the cannabis space have been known to give out multiple LOIs on the same property. And then basically let people throw in their applications, and whoever wins gets their best shot at the lease. So you have to be careful about that. And if there's a space you love, I would implore you to try to either get some sort of more binding with probably a non-refundable deposit LOI to lock up a space for a period of time, or to take some steps towards signing a lease, but just give yourself an escape hatch. And that's somewhere we help people as well.
By an escape hatch, because again, people on this webinar are in it. By escape hatch, you mean if you don't get a license or you don't raise money, that you have an out in your lease that lets you pay some penalty and then you don't have to stay in the space and pay rent. Right?
Correct. That is obviously more expensive, a more expensive proposition than a non-binding LOI. However, it does guarantee you that if you get this license, you're going to have space and you're not going to have to fight with someone later. You're not going to deal with a landlord potentially retrading and trying to stoke the flames of a bidding war between multiple people.
And how are landlords, how have they been? How are we finding them when we find spaces we like? You've been to a bunch of meetings with some of the biggest landlords in the city and some of the smallest ones, and a lot of them don't pan out. What's happening with landlords these days? What are their concerns? How do we talk to them? This is important, and we're going to get back to why it's so important, because first movers are going to have a huge advantage. If you are applying with an LOI or space locked up, it's going to be a big advantage. We're going to talk about that later. But what are you finding at meetings with landlords?
It's a mixed bag, really. It's a mixed bag, and I think partially that's because there's so much uncertainty in the space, and landlords don't know, just like a lot of us didn't know until recently, when this was going to go live.
Mm-hmm.
And again, regs are final now. We have an opening date for the application, but could be another lawsuit tomorrow. Could be 3 more next week. And that could theoretically delay things, as lawsuits tend to do if there's merit to them. So there is some uncertainty here. And because of that, landlords are reacting in a number of different ways.
And that is their big concern, that this isn't going to happen. Do they have other concerns? Are they worried about a cannabis dispensary as a tenant?
They're not necessarily worried about that. And the reason they're not is because they're building in a cannabis premium to the rent. A lot of landlords have actually taken a fairly greedy approach to this process. And they say, ooh, cannabis, lots of money. I can charge you 10 times as much as I charge someone else.
Landlords greedy, Joseph? You sure?
I know. Crazy, right?
Yeah.
We've seen it a lot, but you know what? No one's bitten on these bad deals. So I think now that we have some more clarity and some more finality with respect to timeline, and landlords are still stuck with these same empty spaces that they can't rent for the premiums they thought they could, I think they're going to come back down to earth. And now with the advent of this provisional license process where you don't need a space locked up to apply.
We're going to talk about the provisional in a second.
Yeah,
it just
pushed the leverage in the other direction.
Okay. So anything else you want to say about locking up a space? Are you sure an LOI, Michael asked us, are we sure an LOI is good? Because it's not in the regs, or it's not on the mock application. You're sure it's good?
Yes.
Good.
But just to finish the thought, if you have a space, you're going to get reviewed within the first 30 days. If you don't have a space, you're going to get reviewed, but just not until later in the process. So there is a built-in advantage immediately for people who have been able to lock up a space.
Let's talk about that, because the reason that we put on this webinar today, the day after the regs, is to show people how important it is to be on top of stuff from here until the application window opens, and that first movers have a huge advantage. That's right, Joseph?
Yes.
Why do you think that is? Is this going to shake out just like liquor licenses? So the liquor license world works like this. Or why don't you explain how the liquor license world works and how it's going to be similar to dispensaries?
So New York has generally taken the approach with respect to most types of state licenses that they don't necessarily want to cap things. So for instance, with liquor licenses, there are states that are capped states. So there's a certain number of licenses issued per state, per municipality, per town. And that never changes unless, the population fluctuates or grows a certain extent. Then there's an auction on the courthouse steps, very old school. Then there are open states that don't have a cap on licenses. And depending on whether you're a closed state or an open state, that's going to dictate how much you have to pay for a license, whether you can pay for a license, whether they're trading on the open market or not. New York is
we're an open state forever.
Correct. New York historically has not liked that. So they have had an uncapped approach to licenses for liquor licenses, for instance. However, the process to get a liquor license is intense, and there are lots of guardrails in place to make sure that areas don't get oversaturated and that businesses don't cannibalize each other. So with cannabis, it's going to be a similar idea. There is no cap in the regs for licenses in New York State. There's a virtually unlimited amount of licenses that can be issued. However, they are committed to 50% social equity licenses and 50% non-social equity licenses. And there are parameters around where you can put these licenses, how far you can be from other licenses, how far you can be from churches, from schools, things like that. So I believe.
Well, hang on. Hey, don't just gloss over that, because in, let's say, liquor stores, for example, if you want to open up a liquor store, the same type of liquor store next door to another one, you're not going to be able to do it. Why is that?
Well, because
because if there's no cap, why can't you do it?
There's a standard in the statute called it's referred to as the public convenience and advantage standard. And that is the standard by which the governing body with liquor, which is the state liquor authority, reviews license applications for retail wine shops and retail wine and spirit stores. And they make a determination as to whether your licensed premise or proposed licensed premise in a specific space would benefit the public, would serve the public convenience and advantage. And for that reason, you wouldn't see a high-end wine boutique right next door to another high-end wine boutique. However, you might be able to see a high-end wine boutique next door to a bulletproof store that only sells little airline bottles and doesn't carry a single thing over $10.
Okay, so you think, so this gets back to first movers and why it's important. When you, there are rules that allow a certain number of licensed establishments within a certain amount of feet of each other, right? What is that?
For New York City, where the population is greater than 20,000, we're talking about 1,000 feet.
And that's for cannabis, or this is for liquor?
No, we're talking about cannabis.
Cannabis, 1,000 feet. So if everyone applies, say 3 people apply for a space on the Lower East Side, there's no violation of any regs at that point. Theoretically, those 3 people, if they're first movers, would get approved without having a problem with the other 2 being too close. Is that right? Is that how you're seeing it?
Yeah, I mean, it depends where they are, right? If they're all on Ludlow Street and they're all, clustered together, then there might be an issue and the state might review them all as a cluster and maybe just award one that is the best of the bunch, or could award potentially multiple if they're stores that complement each other as opposed to compete with each other.
Right. Okay. But you see the advantage of moving first, because you might be in a town where you're the only application, or you're one of 2.
So the reason that look, we're going to talk about this later in the program, but the real estate piece is the toughest piece of this. Finding a space that qualifies is the toughest piece of this. And I think the logic behind separating it out into people who have spaces and people who don't is you're letting the people who have spaces locked up get that first mover advantage. They've spent that money, they've made that commitment, and they've sort of doubled down on an area or a neighborhood or a specific location, and it should get first crack. And then the people who don't have spaces yet, they'll be able to take a look at a map when it's their turn to find a space, because they're going to have 12 months to find one. And they're going to be able to see not only what spaces qualify, but also where other places are approved already, which will help instruct them to find locations that'll be more suitable.
Got it. Well, I think we got to the first bullet point of our PowerPoint presentation. I have so many questions for you, and so do our webinar attendees. I'm going to ask you a couple, and feel free to put your questions, and I'll ask them as they pop up and as I feel they're relevant. One question is, have any regs been placed on space location being too close to where alcohol is served?
It's a great question. There is no restriction on how close you can be to a place where alcohol is served. there is just very strict prohibitions on serving or selling alcoholic beverages in a space that's licensed for cannabis and vice versa. So if you have a bar, you can't get a cannabis license in that bar. You can't allow anyone to smoke cannabis in that bar. It's a direct violation of the liquor rules.
But if you have a liquor license, you are absolutely allowed to apply for a cannabis license, right?
Yeah, forget being allowed to. I think you profile as a very nice applicant because you can show the state that you've got experience operating with a state regulatory license and a state and a regulated substance, and dealing with the public on a regular basis with a good track record.
Right. Let's go to bullet point number 3. So I'll keep us on course a little bit, Joseph, but not too much. You wanted to say that there are 3 primary focuses, just getting back to getting your shit together, right? You want to talk about what they should be and why they're important, then we can move on to the next thing.
Yeah, I mean, look, that's kind of the substance of the program today, is, focusing in on what I would consider kind of the 3 primary areas of focus for anyone looking to seriously make a run at cannabis license in New York. One is getting your finances in order, figuring out where you're getting the money from, figuring out how much you need, and putting together the right strategy for raising it, when you raise it, how you raise it. The second is putting your team together, having the right people by your side to shepherd you through this process. We're talking about professionals as well as operational folks, people who have experience in the cannabis space. And the third is the location. As you'll see further in the program, this is the toughest part of this process because the analysis is so tricky.
Okay, let's move on. And let's all just admit that the road from cannabis becoming legal to today was bumpy. It was a rough road. And there's no reason that we should be thinking that the road ahead is going to be anything other than rough as well. They're not all of a sudden going to have everything together and it's just going to be smooth sailing.
Yeah,
So
let's
talk about the regs. You went through the regs a few times, had your nose deep in them. And you're saying not much has changed?
Yeah, not much has changed, but again, the regs are finalized, but this isn't the end of the story. There are some things that haven't been addressed yet. There are some things that are too vague to possibly opine on at this point. I'm expecting FAQs. I'm expecting sample and example things. I'm expecting more educational information to come from the OCM within the coming days and weeks. There are too many things left open-ended. They put a sample application online, which is wildly incomplete, and it is seriously just a sample. It won't address half the things that will exist in the full application.
Like what sticks out is something that when you look, because I was with you when you looked at it and you looked at the sample application and you said, there's so much missing here. What's missing?
Everything that you'd expect to see in a merit-based application. We're talking to our friend and partner, Andrew, and we had the same reaction. Looking at that sample, if it's complete, that's an application for a lottery state, not for a merit-based competitive application process state. There's nothing in there to differentiate yourself from any other applicant. All that's in the sample is your name, your address, your personal information, the name of your company, and that's about it. They don't ask you to talk about your neighborhood impact. They don't ask you to tell them how you're going to be a good applicant. They don't ask for anything related to your business model, how you're going to operate. There's no opportunity.
Okay, so they just farted this thing out just to be able to show that
Correct.
There's going to be a process and here's a sketch of some of the things that might be included, because it is a competitive state and we're going to have to put all those types of things in our application to show that we're good applicants.
Yeah, and look, make no mistake about it. This was a sprint to the finish line here, and it was done in a pretty half-assed fashion. A lot of the folks that I talked to at the OCM about this specific, they haven't even seen it yet. They had nothing to do with this. They just knew they had to pop something up fast because this had to happen yesterday, and they need to open this damn window so they don't get sued again.
So you also say you have clarity on the process. You want to talk about what that means?
Sure. So really clarity on the process means when the actual application window is going to open, specifics with respect to when you'll be able to file an application if you have a space and how that's a significant advantage. And the fact that we know there's going to be this provisional program and what that's going to look like. That's really the clarity I'm talking about, in that we know there's going to be a 60-day window. It starts October 4th, and you'll be able to get reviewed quicker if you have a space. That doesn't mean that you're
What is a,
guaranteed.
go ahead, sorry.
Doesn't mean you're going to be guaranteed to get a license if you're provisionally approved. There's still a lot more hoops to jump through after the fact. But the point is, if you have a space, you do get a shot, to fire an application in early and have a really great shot at getting approved, because you're not really competing with anybody quite yet. Provisional licenses are 100% the way to go. And the timing of things has created an environment where pretty much everyone is being pushed towards a provisional license.
Let's talk about, we haven't even talked about or defined what a provisional license is. It's not something that exists in the world of restaurants and bars. We don't have provisional licenses. We have temps. It's not the same. So what is a provisional license? What does it allow you to do? How do you use it as a tool if you're an operator? Why would you apply for that over the full Monty?
Yeah, it's a good question. So the provisional licenses were a concept that didn't exist until the last redraft of the regs. And I think the reason they included it is because they recognized that they were creating an environment where nobody wanted to sign a lease for a space. Nobody could lock up real estate because of how much uncertainty there was with respect to timing, with respect to what DASNY was doing, with respect to where, card license stores might pop up or might not pop up. It was just insane almost to sign a lease unless, you've got the money to burn. So the provisional license is essentially, it gives applicants the opportunity to complete a license application, albeit a modified, shorter mini application that addresses some of the basics, gives the personal information, company information, region even. We don't know yet. We haven't seen an application, but I'm anticipating that. And pretty much provide everything but location specific items. And
like what? Because location specific, obviously you have a lease. Does that mean security plan? What else is not going to be on the provisional?
So here's the interesting thing, and the regs, really didn't speak to this as clearly as I would have liked them to, and I think we're going to see it in the coming days or weeks. We don't know. I mean, if you're asking me if I can put together a financial model for a dispensary in a location that I don't have yet, that's a size that I don't know yet, with a population of people who live around it that I have no idea about, well, sure, I can put something together, but it's not going to be accurate, right? So we don't know yet if the state's going to want us to go through that exercise just to show them that we know what we're talking about, or to make some assumptions on what we're looking for and provide them a model based on that, or if they're just going to punt the whole thing and give us kind of a bullshit application similar to the sample that appears on the state website that, just basically verifies the individuals in the company to make sure that they're eligible. And then that will be conditionally approved. And then you can go ahead and find a location and jump through all these hoops later. I think that the latter would be easier for the state. It would also be lazy. And I don't think it's going to do anyone much of a service because you're not really qualifying for anything.
So tell me what a provisional license is. It's going to be an easier application. You're going to put your application in, you're going to get, yay, I want a provisional license. You have been, I don't know, what is it going to say?
Yeah, it's essentially
licensed.
It's essentially
what do you do with that? What's the big deal?
It's essentially a pre-approval. You can then take that and you have 12 months to turn that into an annual license. So you have 12 months.
You have 12 months. So if I get a provisional license, a clock starts ticking that says 12 months from now, I have to have a space locked up. I have to have my money. I have to have my full application in. So it's a two-part license process, right?
Correct. Because the
Okay.
provisional is worthless without the follow through.
Right.
It's just a piece of paper. But what the provisional does is it allows you to do some things, right? It gives you peace of mind that you've checked at least all the boxes thus far. Maybe gives you more confidence that you're going to be successful to go get a license.
Well,
It's
doesn't
going
it
to
mean that you won't be disqualified based
correct,
on your background, whatever that
correct.
is?
All that stuff is out of the way. And it's also a really useful tool when it comes to raising money. A lot of people who are not capitalized already may want to consider pursuing a provisional license so that they can include that as part of their offering when they go
Okay,
out.
stop there, because didn't that happen in New Jersey? Didn't a lot of people get provisional licenses and then go around to their investors and say, look, I got a provisional license. Now do you want to invest? And they
Yes,
did?
yes, a lot of people did that. The problem in New Jersey is they can't find spaces that qualify.
Hmm.
So people are sitting there with the money, with the provisional approval, and they're in like the 11th month looking around, and they can't find a space that qualifies. And
But it
time's running.
helps a lot when you're raising money, right?
It helps when you're raising money. It helps to give landlords a degree of comfort that you're not just a guy with a dream. You've actually taken a step towards getting a license. And again, we don't know what's going to be included in that provisional license application yet. So I can't tell you if a provisional approval is a real significant thing that we can build on, or it's just like a mortgage pre-approval and they spit out thousands a day and big deal.
Do you think everyone's going to get the provisional? Do you think it's going to be hard to get? And do you think it's going to happen more quickly than the full license?
It's a good question, and I don't know how to answer that until I know the specifics of what in the application, right? Because if it's just asking you the name of your company and the identifying information of the principals, well, everyone who's not doesn't possess a statutory disqualification is going to be approved.
Right. Okay. Anything else you want to say about provisional? So we get the provisional, we go out there, we raise some money, we lock up a space, we got ourselves an out. Still, even though we have a provisional, you have to have an out in that lease. And now we're ready to put in our full application for an annual license. So now we're adding whatever was taken away from that first one, from the provisional license application. We're putting together the full package. It's going to be 800 pages or whatever. It's going to be a big application. And then what happens after that? Our application goes in. And when are these windows going to open? We have this weird 60-day window. We're not used to windows here. 60 days. And then is it going to be next quarter, next year? When's the next window going to open?
We don't know if there's going to be a next window or when it's going to be. My anticipation is that they're going to give people who win in this wave an opportunity to get open and to take a lay of the land before they open any kind of new window for new licenses. I mean, these things don't happen overnight. If we apply October 4th and let's say we are approved because we have a space and all is great and we're done November 1st, well, it's going to take us a while to build out the space, to train staff, to get up and running, to get approved for operations. It's not just going to happen overnight. So, and that's the people who have a space already. Some of the provisional folks might take a year to find a space, and I think most of them will take a fair amount of time. So you're talking about at least a year before we have a marketplace that is, pardon the pun, but like seeded appropriately. So you could have 150 provisional approvals, right, in the next, let's call it 90 days. And 150 of those guys might not be able to open for another 11 months. So to open another wave of licenses before that period expires would be a bit irresponsible, in my opinion.
So we got to get in on the first 60 days. When we talk about timeline for liquor licenses, we always talk about community board and the role that they play. There's a 30-day notice you have to give. You have to go to the community board. They last until 2 a.m. It's NIMBY Central, la, la, la. What role are they going to have in this process?
They will have one. They will certainly have one. Although the state did a pretty good job of neutralizing how much trouble they can cause. That was a part of the legislative process that I was pretty involved with. And they are not going to have the same type of power and ability that they do with the liquor licensing process with cannabis. While they will be entitled to a notification in advance of a filing of an application, and they will have an opportunity to present an opinion to the state, they will be restricted with respect to how they can, put stipulations on your operation.
Okay, hold on. So just like liquor, we have to give a notice to the local community board or town or wherever it is.
Yep.
Right? Then usually they call us in and say, here's an application for you. Fill out our application. So now you got to fill out the community board application.
Mm-hmm.
Then they're going to say, come on in so we can invite all of the neighbors who don't support you.
More or less.
Okay.
But, it's interesting. Community boards have taken a very different position with cannabis that they have with liquor. Some have a formal process. They're having meetings. They're calling people in. They're putting people through that process that we're familiar with from the liquor license process. Some are just punting. They're just saying, you know what? There's no meaningful stipulations I could put on this business, and I don't know anything about it, and I don't think I need to be involved. That is strangely what some community boards are doing. And, similar to with liquor, if a community board does not provide an opinion, as far as the state's concerned, it's no comment, it's no issue. My take on this, though,
imagine that community board 1, 2, 3 in Manhattan are going to take a hands-off approach and be like, sure, no problem. Come put your dispensary on Ludlow Street.
You know what? Believe it or not, I've talked to all of these boards, and their position is, well, we would love to have something licensed and regulated here and get rid of all the illegal ones, because those are the ones that concern us. Those are the ones that are the problem. And those are the ones that don't have to answer to anybody. So that has been a prevailing sentiment. But I actually believe that with cannabis, we're going to be able to use the community boards to our advantage in certain ways that, is kind of an interesting take on this. And that's just my opinion, having done this with liquor and understanding how they act with liquor licenses and what part they play in the process. And the reality is, if there's a dispensary going into a neighborhood, the people who live there should have an opportunity to, understand what's going in there and what they're about and what the story is. Do I think they should be able to say, no, you can't be here without cause other than I don't want it? No. And the statute makes it clear that they can't. It's just a time, place, and manner issue. They can talk about times that you're open. They can talk about not wanting you there if you're within a certain amount of feet of a school or a church, which is in the statute anyway. And they can talk about, other things like, traffic and parking and other things, that are associated with the business, but they can't restrict hours beyond a certain number. They can't restrict the way you do your business in any way that's more restrictive than what's in the state regulation. So they have been neutralized somewhat, but I do think, like I said, there's an opportunity to work hand in hand with community boards to get their approval, because I think the fact that most boards are not giving approvals or denials, so to speak, I think there's an opportunity to work with community boards to get that approval. And it could be a really valuable part of your application package if you do it right.
Good point. I never thought I would hear you say anything like that, where you could use the community board to your advantage. It's always been the opposite. But that's good to know. So someone asked this question because we're talking about the timeline, and you said, well, you're going to get a provisional license. You're going to get a year to file your annual license application. What happens on day 366?
It's a great question. So most of the cannabis regulations that have been enacted borrow language, if they don't outright plagiarize language, from the alcoholic beverage control law in New York. And I make that point so I can try to forecast for you what I think this might look like based on what it looks like with liquor. So with liquor, you get a conditional letter of approval if you've satisfied all the basic conditions for your license, but you haven't satisfied the liquor authority that you're able to open for business yet. And that conditional letter of approval is good for a period of 6 months. If you can't comply within 6 months, there is a mechanism to request an extension. If you can't complete the process within that period, there is a mechanism to seek one more extension. And oftentimes for that one, you may need to provide, some reason for good cause. After that, you're out of options, and at that point, the application's done. Now, there's a mechanism to seek a reconsideration if you're able to comply after that fact, and then of course, you have whatever recourse the courts will allow if there's an extenuating circumstance that would make that.
So you think it's going to be day 366, you're not ready, but you're making progress, you can file for an extension, and they may give you even another extension on top of that, but we'll see.
Theoretically. Now, there's nothing in the regs that indicate that will happen necessarily. But what we've seen in other states is if there's good cause to request an extension, we've seen them granted for the most part.
Okay, so now we understand the timeline. October 4th, 60 days, provisional. We'll see when the application comes out. You can apply for a provisional, you can apply for an annual. What should people be doing between now, today, and October 4th? How do you prepare for this? How do you become the first? I know we're talking about that today, but do you want to take that piece by piece throughout the PowerPoint, or do you want to give us an overview?
Well, just generally speaking, I think the first decision that needs to be made is, do you really want to do this? And if you really want to do it, you have to understand the commitment involved, on a financial level, on a personal and psychological level. It's not easy. Cannabis is not easy. Everything is slower in cannabis. Everything that should take a week takes a year, and you have to have the stomach for it. You have to have the mettle for it. And if you decide, yes, I want to move forward, all right, well, now we can talk about the next step, but you have to be serious. This isn't like, I'll try, I'll see what happens. You're going to get slaughtered. You got to really be committed. And then you've got to start to put, all these pieces I was talking about together. You got to understand how much money you need and make sure you have access to it. You have to figure out, how you're going to approach this real estate piece, or if it's even in the cards for you. And if it's not, well, then you can kind of choose your own adventure here and go towards the provisional license just to get something.
So you got to make a choice now. Like, you got to make a choice within the next couple of weeks as to whether or not you're going full Monty, annual license, or provisional.
Well, look, first step out of the gate, if you decide you want to do this, I would go and align yourself with the right people. That's what you need, just so you have some guidance, because probably everyone on this webinar who is considering doing this in New York has not done it somewhere else and has no idea what they should be doing. And they could be the most responsible, smartest, well-capitalized people in the world, but if you don't know what you're doing, you're going to shoot yourself in the foot.
Okay, let's go on to the next slide. Everybody wants to know how much everything's going to cost. How much does it cost to open? All the fees, start to finish. You want to take us through it?
Yeah, I'll do sort of a general overview. What you see on the screen here is your big cost components, right? The fees associated with locking up your location. If you're going to go in that direction, you're going to have to pay legal fees. You're going to have to pay a landlord either a lockup fee or a security deposit or something that's going to be significant. There's a lot of design and build elements to a dispensary. That's a huge chunk of this money. And there's hiring the right people. The people for the application process, as well as the people for operations after the fact. these are your big cost components. And, you know, everyone's looking for that magic number. And of course, every dispensary is different. But I would say modest size dispensary somewhere in New York City, you're looking at probably about $1 million is a good place to start thinking. If you want to be in Times Square, if you want to be 10,000 square feet, yeah, you can push that number to 10 million real fast. If you want to be a hole in the wall, you know, in Staten Island or in Queens, somewhere in like off the beaten path kind of thing, could you do it for cheaper? Maybe. But I think $1
Oh,
million.
it's just like the restaurant. It's just like the restaurant business. You can
Oh,
build out a
100%.
palace and have, 350 seats. You could build a mom and pop neighborhood restaurant too for a lot less.
Yep,
But
same.
whatever it is, it's a lot more expensive than restaurants
Yes. It's a lot
per
more.
square foot.
It's a lot more expensive than restaurants, and primarily that's because there's some uncertainty, and it's highly regulated in a way more so than restaurants are.
Okay. $1 million get you in the door. $1 million for your local neighborhood spot.
Yeah.
How are these places doing? How are the legal cannabis dispensaries doing?
So, you know, it's interesting. We've been hearing about this forever. I think everybody on this webinar knows you can't walk down the street without bumping into 5 stores. But I think people don't realize there's only 23 legally licensed places throughout the entire state, and 5 of them are delivery only. So there's only 18 storefronts throughout the entire state so far. And everything that I've heard from every one of those folks that I've talked to is they're all crushing it. A lot of those numbers are public. Housing Works is, you know, the first one that opened. Their numbers are public, and they're very big numbers.
Like what? What's Housing Works? I heard some big numbers. What are you hearing?
Yeah, I mean, their first 30 days of operation, they were averaging 6 figures a day.
Wow. Okay.
And
That's real money.
I know that they're, you know, they're in the 8 figures at the moment, and we're not even done with the year yet.
Amazing. It's nice to have high check averages. You know, we're used to in our industry, $40, $50, you're doing well. What's a check average when someone walks through a dispensary, do you think?
Depends on the dispensary.
Hundreds.
But yeah, it's gonna be more.
Amazing. Let's go on to the next slide. We have 1 million questions, by the way. I'm actually gonna wait until the end to ask them because you're gonna answer quite a few of them. So thank you for writing. Keep writing. We're collecting them and we'll get to them. You want to talk about getting the money, Joseph? Because we've seen a lot of people get licenses or get approvals, and getting the money is not so easy.
Nope, it's not so easy. There's risk. Not everybody has the stomach for the risk. So while everybody says they want to get involved in cannabis and they want to invest in cannabis, when push comes to shove, a lot of people kind of chicken out at the last minute. The first thing you have to do is you have to understand the value of your business. You need to work with someone who understands the business, not just someone who knows how to put a business plan together or a financial model together, but someone who actually understands the mechanics of a cannabis business, who understands the margins, who understands, you know, how to put a pro forma together so that, you know, you're not just going into this blind or guessing or pulling something from, you know, a $50 subscription online. You can actually put together a tailored business plan for your space based on your square footage, based on your layout, based on, you know, a lot of market data, and you can come up with a good business model, and you can develop a valuation for your business that makes sense.
And
once
you need it for yourself.
you need it
If
for
you
yourself,
really want to understand what you're getting into, work with somebody who understands the cannabis industry and put together a business plan, figure out exactly how much it's going to, the same way you would for a restaurant. What's it going to cost me? What's my equipment going to cost? What's my security team going to cost? Go through all of those things, figure out how much money you need to make, and then make a decision if you want to go raise money. But you got to do this, especially in a business that you don't know yet.
100%. You know, you're not going to hire someone who builds decks for tech companies to do, you know, your business model for your restaurant. You're just not. You're going to probably do it yourself because you've operated restaurants before. But if you haven't, You're going to go find someone who understands the industry and they don't come up with numbers that are just insane. You're going to need it for yourself. You're going to need it for the application process. And then you're going to need it to go and raise money if you need to raise money. So you need to figure out the value of your business. Then you need to figure out how much money you need to go and raise and what percentage of your business you're going to give up for that and how you want to raise that money. Do you want to take on equity partners? Do you want to do it through debt? Do you want to come up with some other arrangement? And these are all, these all go towards the strategy for fundraising that you want to employ based on what your goals and dreams are. And we talked about the timing of it. Some people are coming out of the gate raising money on an idea with a flashy deck and nothing else. Other people are choosing to fund it themselves to get to a point where they get a provisional approval. And then with that provisional approval, they're going to build that flashy deck and they're going to go out there and they're going to ask for a higher valuation based on the fact that they've already taken a step towards de-risking this. So, there's a million ways to skin this cat and you got to find the right one for you. And that's where the professionals come into play. Like, we do all this stuff, by the way, shameless plug here. And there are other people that do this stuff too. And then there's a lot of people out there who look to take advantage of people. So I would just caution people, yes, of course you should hire someone to help you along the way with all this stuff, but just be very discerning with who you're going to work with. Make sure they're real people that you can go and verify, get references for, validate, and that they've been around a while.
Yeah, we've heard a lot of it's too good to be true stories that turn out to be nightmares. So be careful. Let's move on to the next thing. And don't be undercapitalized, says Joey Regs, right?
Correct.
The biggest issue we do see is people just run out of steam and they run out of money. And then it's just all flushed down the toilet. It's very sad. So don't undercapitalize, build your business plan correctly. Want to talk about the personnel. So now we've got our business plan. We've got a strategy. We're out raising money, but we still got work to do because we're going to open this thing at some point. And there's not just GMs all over the place or people you can just go poach from the restaurant down the street. You actually got to put time, focus, and energy into finding the right personnel. Who are they, Joseph?
So it depends. There's 3 buckets here, or there's 2 buckets really. There's your pre-application team and there's your post-license award team. And finding them is a challenge. I mean, finding your pre-application team, you can do your research. You can listen to people who do webinars like we do. You can go on Google, you can call people, you can see who you feel right with. Like I said, you have to be very discerning. You really want to find someone who has the right mix of cannabis experience and New York State regulatory experience and understands what it's like to do business in New York State and New York City on both levels, right? You want someone who understands the neighborhoods, who understands the way that state regulatory policy works, and you cannot miss out on having someone on your team who understands cannabis operations. It's critical. And if you do a good job of selecting your pre-application team, they will help you to find your post-license award team. And that is the trickier part. And they're not just grown on trees. Cannabis is still a very, very young legal industry in this country. So the talent pool out there is extraordinarily shallow. And finding professionals in this space that can show up for you is an incredible challenge. So you really need, the right resources to go and get those people. Shout out to John Como on the webinar.
What's next? Your pre-application team. You just went through some of this stuff. You need the lawyers. We're here. Hello. Accountants. We have accountants that we like that are out there who know this stuff and who you're looking for in an accountant, very important person on this team.
Yeah, I mean, look, that's it. You need your lawyer, whether it's us or someone else. Again, make sure they're verified people who have done this shit before, who you can go out there and get references for that know what they're doing from a setup perspective and how to protect you and kind of guide you through this. Your accountant is critical to understand how to set things up from a tax perspective, how to take advantage of certain things, how to avoid certain things. This is going to be probably the most critical piece of how you're going to maximize how much money you can make in this business. Because again, highly regulated, taxes are incredibly annoying. That whole 280E issue still gives people nightmares. And the consultant is a cannabis operations person, someone who actually has opened these businesses before that can help to shepherd you through, this minefield, which is pretty much what it is from here until you get open for business. And then you have another minefield to traverse. So I call it a brain trust. And like I said, cannabis operation experience, general regulatory and compliance experience, and someone who understands New York State and New York City specifically, if that's where you're looking to be.
Solid advice. What's next?
Absolutely no substitute for that.
No substitute for experience when it comes to cannabis, right? Joey
Yep.
Regs. Good. Who's on your post-license award team? Yay, we won a license. Yay, I've got some money. Now I got to go open up something that I've never opened before. What the hell am I doing?
Yeah. So look, you still need your lawyer to keep you compliant. You may need to raise more money and your lawyer will, handle that on the paperwork side. You still need your accountant who's going to handle your books and make sure your finances in order. And now the consultant is going to come front and center. And this is the person, and I'm using the term consultant kind of loosely. It's just kind of part of the team, but it's your person who understands cannabis on a different level. It's someone who can go out there and find you the right team or be on your team.
When you say team, like you need a GC who knows what they're doing, right?
Oh, 100%.
Who's on that team?
Yeah. So look, you need someone in your corner who's going to help you cut through the shit and vet people and find the right people who are going to do this for you. There's a million people out there, more in cannabis than almost any other industry on the planet, looking to screw you, making promises they can't keep, saying they do all the shit they don't know how to do. Every GC in the world is saying they build cannabis dispensaries, and 90% of them don't. So you need someone who can actually present you with the right GC, present you with the right operational consultant, help you to hire and train a staff. Like, this is the know-how. This is the stuff that you can't know unless you've done this before, and you can't learn on the fly. This is where everyone gets screwed. This is the second thing that I said, the reason why people go out of business is they don't put enough stock and enough value in the personnel. That is the reason that companies fail to grow and scale, because they don't have the right people in place. They think they can do it themselves. They just put an ad on, Craigslist or whatever it is to go find people to work there. And they're not cannabis people, and they've never done this before. And there's no one who knows how to drive the bus driving the bus. So, to the extent you can hedge against that by bringing some people in to help you not make the mistakes that are all too common, it's a good investment to do.
Straight talk from Joey Regs. I like it. What's next? Real estate, the toughest nut to crack. Lock up a space now or wait. I think we talked about this a lot already because it's very interesting to me and to our clients. They always talk about the real estate. You want to just give us a couple of lines, some summary of this?
Yeah, go to the next slide and we've got it laid out.
Oh.
So when you're choosing a location, you have a lot of things to consider. And the reason that the real estate piece of this is so challenging, and the reason that I'm not pushing everyone in the direction of locking up a space and trying to file a complete license application, is because the analysis you have to go through to verify whether a space is going to work is pretty rigorous, and not every space will work. This isn't a restaurant or a bar where you just go and check and make sure it's not within 200 feet of a church or a school, and that the space is, has a C of O and you're good to go. There's a lot more that goes into this analysis, and I'll touch on some of the kind of the high level points here, just so you understand why it's so difficult. Now, last year, the state gave every town and municipality really throughout the state an opportunity to opt out of having retail dispensaries in their town. And while New York City did not opt out, Manhattan, Brooklyn, all 5 boroughs are good to go. Outside of New York City, a lot of towns chose to opt out. In Long Island, the overwhelming majority of towns chose to opt out. And if a town opts out, then you can't be there unless they opt back in. And that's a whole different thing. You got to hire a lobbyist and spend a lot of money and cross your fingers. But let's say we find a town that allows for cannabis. New York City, for instance, allows for cannabis. Now you have to look at zoning. You have to make sure the zoning provisions allow for the type of store you're looking to open. Then you need to look at proximity. You have to look at, you can't be within 500 feet of a school, you can't be within 200 feet of a church, and you can't be within 1,000 feet of another dispensary unless you're going to be significantly different and you think you can make a good faith case that, you know, the businesses complement each other and that the neighborhood needs both. Now, the biggest piece of this, which we haven't talked about yet, is whether the landlord building even qualifies. And that is where this analysis goes completely off page from anything you'd consider with any other business. We have a situation here where cannabis is still federally illegal. And because of that, no landlord who has debt on a building that's held by a traditional bank is going to be able to lease their space with you. So instead of finding a space you like, negotiating with the landlord, signing a lease, and you're done, you actually have to find out how the landlord owns the building. And if they have a mortgage, you got to find out what bank holds their mortgage. And if it's Citibank, Chase, Wells Fargo, any of the big ones, it's not going to be an eligible space for a cannabis business, because the second they lease that space to you, they'll be in breach of their mortgage. So, you know, this is the analysis we have to do in advance. In New York City, real estate is very, very expensive. So the likelihood that someone owns a building outright, you know, is not great. So
now we've been working on this issue for a lot of clients. I was with you yesterday, Joseph, and you got an email from a broker we know who said, I got a bunch of landlords that I found because he's trying to make his bones in cannabis who have free and clear buildings. So that took him time. That took him, he's been doing this for a couple of years.
Yeah.
It takes time to find those buildings and then those people, meaning the landlords, who are going to be willing to deal with you.
Yeah. So that's, I mean, look, my approach to the real estate piece is the first thing you have to do is you've got to come up with a list of neighborhoods that would work for you and your concept. Right? You have to, we want you to open the business you want to open. And in your mind, you have an idea of what that business is like. And there's an idea of what neighborhoods would support it. So we start with that list of neighborhoods, and then we go and look for spaces. And then we go through this analysis. Okay, opted in, zoning is good, proximity search checks all the boxes. Then we have to go and do this analysis to find out how the building is owned. And, you know, more times than not, that's where people strike out. So
isn't that the first question you should ask when you're looking at a space?
Yeah, you could, but it's also not always the easiest thing to find, right? You're walking down the street, you can immediately identify if there's a school or a church nearby. You can immediately identify if there's a dispensary nearby. You have to actually do a little research to find out if there's a mortgage, who holds it, what the story is.
Okay. Or you can just ask.
Right, but chances are you're not walking down the street with the landlord, right? You're just
Right.
walking around looking.
Okay, but your first convo with the landlord, you got to be saying, hey, here's the deal.
Absolutely.
With cannabis, do you own your building or not?
Absolutely. And because these spaces are so hard to find, that is really what empowers these landlords to feel like they can put that cannabis premium on things, because they know what they have.
Cannabis premium.
And what we find is that, you know, and I've been advising everyone that we've been working with on the licensing front so far, is not to make a deal with the devil. Don't make a bad deal. Because with the advent of this provisional license process, we don't have to make that bad deal just to get in the game. There's a way to get in the game now, and then we sort out the real estate piece later. And if this guy comes back down to earth, we can go and revisit it.
Got to time it a little bit. What's the last? Is there any more slides? So we have all these questions and answers. You ready, Joseph? You want to do a little calisthenics before I start the questions barrage?
I'm ready.
You ready? Okay. This is from our dear friend Alicia. Hi, Alicia. Does HL have visibility to addresses on applications that have locations? So not provisional licenses. Once applications are filed with Albany, can y'all see the locations in their applications? In these applications?
It's a great application. It's a great question. And we've asked this question to the state, and what they've told us is that they are planning to roll out a program on their website similar to the Liquor Authority's LAMP program, so that you'll be able to see a map in real time showing you data points of where there are approved licenses, where there are pending licenses, and things like that. So that's what they're supposed to do. Whether they do, it's another story, but it's a great question, and it's going to be a critical data point for us as we're helping people do this analysis.
Okay. Another dear friend, Carlos. Hi, Carlos. Is there a radial limit for deliveries, Joseph?
No.
You can deliver from Buffalo to Staten Island.
I mean, theoretically, but at some point it just doesn't make sense, right?
Okay.
There's a limit with respect to how many delivery people you can have.
Right.
But that's it.
Another one of our great friends and clients, Theo. Hi, Theo. I'm curious about opening a cannabis bakery for both distribution and as a shop. I do have a location locked up. Is distribution a viable avenue? How much does a license cost all in?
Yeah, I'd have to understand what you mean by distribution, because if I'm understanding this correctly, Theo, it sounds like you are going to be a bakery that's going to make cannabis infused items, and then you would like to sell those items to people at your bakery and distribute maybe to other retailers, sell wholesale, things like that. And you're not going to be able to do all that. So let's talk offline about maybe there's a creative way to cobble some things together, but as it stands, you're not going to be able to do all those things. There's going to be a very strict two-tier system where you are either going to be a producer or manufacturer or a retailer, but not both. There might be a micro business angle for you, but we're going to have to talk about that offline, because at the moment, I don't necessarily see how that can work.
Charles has a question. Hi, Charles. Do we know that all types will begin to be accepted, or types of licenses, that is, on October 4th? Because he had spoken to you and said maybe some will and some won't be available. What do we know?
Yeah, they talked about staggering it originally. At the meeting yesterday, the statement they gave on what's going to open when is all the major licenses that people are talking about, including dispensaries, were included in what's going to open on the 4th.
What was not that caught your surprise?
Yeah, they didn't mention delivery specifically, and I don't know if they just didn't want to run through every single license class, or if there are certain ones that they're not opening on the 4th quite yet.
This is from our friend Peter, our great friend Peter. Hi, Peter. He says, can you expand a little bit on why it's more expensive than a restaurant to open up a dispensary?
Sure. So there are going to be security requirements. There are going to be design requirements. There are going to be a lot of general recording and management requirements in a dispensary that are not required for a restaurant or a bar, and they're very expensive. You're going to need to build out a vault in the back. There are, again, more security things that you're going to need that you wouldn't need in a restaurant. You obviously need to buy product, which is going to be way more expensive than your traditional food costs would normally be. And then there's going to be hiring and training staff and paying them probably more than you'd pay restaurant employees. So there are a number of reasons why it's more expensive. The other reason why it's more expensive is it's a bit more unpredictable. this isn't quite systematic yet. You could have your license and be waiting for an operational inspection for months, and you're paying rent the whole time. You're paying salaries the whole time. You're paying everything the whole time, and you're just waiting. I mean, that's where we see a lot of these card people today. They've spent over $1 million and they're just sitting there. They can't do anything because of this lawsuit.
It's terrible.
Yeah.
Last question for Joey Regs. What happens to the current unlicensed shops all over New York City? And I want to just say, for you answer, that we always have to follow the money. The state plans on making a lot of money off its taxes. It hasn't been collecting that yet. Once people start opening and the state sees that their tax pool is going to be limited by all these other shops, certainly they're going to get a bee in their bonnet. Mayor Adams already has a bee in his bonnet. And what do you think the licensed shops are going to do when the unlicensed ones are next door? So I think you follow the money. We're going to see a lot of action. If you listen to the sound bites every day on TV or in the paper, you start hearing more chirping about closing. Mayor Adams said something yesterday. Governor Hochul said something. And so it's coming. That's my opinion. What's yours, Joseph?
Yeah, it's coming. I mean, if you're paying attention to the details and reading between the lines and, you know, reading the stuff that's not making headlines necessarily, the state and the city have both been implementing certain things, making certain changes to create the infrastructure and to provide the resources to have a huge enforcement action and to go around and sweep everybody up. And I heard recently they think they can shut every single illegal store down in about 3 months' time. They have the resources for it. They're ready to go. But my opinion has always been that they're not going to expend those resources until there are a more significant number of licensed businesses to protect.
Yeah,
I think having the unlicensed stores everywhere is actually strangely serving the state's interests at the moment, because I think the people that aren't paying as much attention to this as we are think that the state has done a bang up job on rolling out cannabis because it's on every damn corner. And I don't think they hate that. It takes a little bit of heat off them from the general public. But I do think that as we roll out more and more legal stores, you are going to see these enforcement actions really, really step up.
Thank you, Joseph. I always love talking to you about cannabis. I love talking to you about everything, but cannabis especially. That was very informative. Do you want to say anything to wrap up? Because we're out of time and we're out of questions.
Yeah, I mean, look, the last thing I'll say, and I'll leave it here. We have been beating this drum for years now, calling for legalization in New York, charting it out, providing updates for people. And it's been a very long and emotionally draining process. And the goalposts have, you know, kept moving more times than I can count. But we're at a point now where there's only so much wiggle room for the state. There's only so much further they can move. This stuff is happening. It's happening now. And I feel like a broken record, but if you do want to take a real run at this, if you do want to get into this space, the time to do it is now. And we've taken a lot of steps and we've put a lot of effort into building our own infrastructure to make sure that we can support people, that specifically our hospitality clients who want to make the transition to cannabis. And we've put everything in place on our side to make sure that we can be that resource for you on cannabis side the way that we are on the hospitality side. So if you are interested, reach out, or really at this point, or forever hold your peace, right? Like this is it. It's like, it's go time now, or you sit back and watch and hope there's another wave and hope there's still an opportunity. But, you know, risk reward is always going to be, you know, first, right? You're always going to want that big reward. Sure, it takes a little bit of risk, but, you know, this is going to happen. We never said New York was going to do this right, but we guaranteed that New York was going to do it, and they're doing it.
And here it is. Well, thank you, Joseph. Thank you to Alex, our technician, Alex Randrup. Thank you. And thank you to all of you who attended this webinar. We had a huge turnout. We're really happy to talk to everybody. Call us, email us, whatever, we get back to you. Thank you all and good luck in cannabis. Thanks, Joseph.
See ya.